Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm your host, Chris Raybon of the Action Network. And this episode is your AFC betting preview part 2, where we're going to cover the AFC East and the AFC South. For this episode, as all of them, we're going to go team by team, breaking down the outlooks of each one, discuss their win totals heavily. And here to help me do it, once again, the Prime Minister of Degenerate Nation, Stuckey. Stuck, what's going on?
What up? Excited to ramble more about these teams. I'll try to be more brief. No, I won't. But yeah, just super hyped. Talk about every team, good, bad, ugly. So let's dive in.
Yeah, and like you to focus on the ugly, especially because a lot of times this time of year, people were reading beat reports, reading a lot of positive things, and we get kind of a skewed perception of all the teams, and that's kind of translates to the market where a lot of times there's a more optimistic projection, and I think there's more money to be made kind of fading teams and betting unders and things like that. So let's start with the
If I read another report that says that from a player that says this scheme, or the coach saying this scheme is a better fit for him now that he's here, it's always a better fit. You ever say, I just want a player to go to a new team and be like, you know what? The scheme, I just wanted the money, and the scheme doesn't really fit my skill set. But everyone is in the best shape. Every scheme is a perfect fit. And every locker room is in sync. Which is not the case.
It's like, somebody needs to be like, the scheme isn't the best, but we're just gonna try our best, and hopefully we get to the playoffs. But no one's going to say that. So,
and if I don't, I'll just look at my bank account. So,
right. I think Andrew Bynum had the best quote where they were doing like the end of the year interview for him. I think when he was on the Lakers, and they were like, Lakers talking about maybe not bringing you back. He was like, "There's a bank in every city." That was the best. That was the best response, I think. So, shout out to Andrew Bynum. But the Buffalo Bills 10.5 is the win total at BetMGM. Plus 125 to the over. So, and that kind of reflects that this is a tough division, at least with the top three. They are plus 165 at BetMGM to win the AFC East, slightly better than the Jets and Miami. This Bills team, I think, a couple of things that stand out. Number one, how sustainable is this Joe Brady offense, where they got a lot more run heavy over the second half of the season, but now you lose Stephon Diggs, you lose Gabe Davis. And number two, the McDermott defense with safeties who really aren't the same safeties that they've been accustomed to having on the back end. It looks like Hamlin might start, Taylor Rapp, Hoyer and
Hamlin probably maybe starting week 1 with Bishop and Edwards hurt. That's scary.
Right. So, talk to me about Buffalo, given those two things. I think the questions on offense, and then the questions, especially on the back end at safety on defense.
Yeah. So Sean McDermott's defense, he's a Jim Johnson disciple, good at figuring out ways to get pressure, more zone-based, cover 3 a lot on the back end. All these defenses I talk about, that's just like where they slant. Like, I think the Bills ran cover 3 30% of the time last year, which was their number one. But it's only 30% of the time. And I think cover 3, which was ran 36-ish% on the rise. Cover 2 man is dying. Cover 1 way down over the last 5 years. But whenever I say that, like, it's just their biggest tendency. But all these teams run a myriad of defensive looks, but more zone heavy defense, which really fits the corners well. I mean, Bedford, who I think is going to get the second corner spot. Elam, I think he might still be in the mix. To me, he's a pure man corner, and he just doesn't have the chops. But Douglas, great. I mean, he was a great addition last year. He is a great zone defense corner, and Teron Johnson could do it all in the slot. He man zone, played against the run. So their corners are solid, which is a good starting point. And your defensive ends, it's now the Epineza and Russo show, because they lost a lot because you got to pay Allen. There's a lot of cap casualties. So, you lose Diggs and Davis in the offensive end. You lose Morse at center. McGovern's going to slide from guard to center. And Edwards is going to slide in at guard. So all 5 guys played last year at least, so there's some continuity there. But on the defensive side, you lose Trey White, who's been hurt lately, you lose Floyd, and then most importantly, you lose Poyer and Hyde. And with this defense that McDermott runs, the safeties are so important. Really big focus on limiting explosive plays. They'll change their coverage looks a lot. Similar to Cincinnati, I have the same sentiment. I thought Cincinnati, after losing Bates and Bell, their defense was going to fall off. I think that's going to happen again here. There's you still do have solid corners. Oliver and Jones back from injury, are solid inside. I like Epinesa and Russo. So there are some pieces here, but the safeties just scare me, and I think it could all fall apart. You also lost Matt Milano to an injury. It's huge. He's just so important from a communication standpoint. So him and the safeties, they kind of got all the ducks in a row for this defense from a communication standpoint. So I think you could see a lot more busts and explosive plays allowed, which I think is going to be problematic. I mean, maybe Von Miller can give him something more, but I'll have to see it before I believe it. So, yeah, just nickel heavy D, always just, rush four a lot. But the communication on the back end is so key, and that's where I think these losses are going to really, really hurt. So I think the defense is going to take a step back. And by the way, it's one of the hardest schedules in the NFL. I mean, just a brutal schedule. I mean, yeah, take a look at some of these stretches. At Baltimore, then Houston, oh, baby. Diggs Allen. That'll be popcorn. Then at the Jets. That's 3-game stretch against 3 of the main contenders in the AFC. And how about this one? At Seattle, then at Miami, then at Indianapolis, then home for KC in 4 weeks before the bye.
And then the Niners coming out.
Niners coming out of the bye. Then you're going across the country, taking on the Rams, then at Detroit. Brutal. At least you got a break late in the year, but you don't really play any, you also don't get, the benefit of, playing a cold weather team, warm weather teams at home in Buffalo. You're playing the Jets and the Patriots late in the year at home. You're going to Miami when the humidity will be high early on. So, yeah, it's a tough schedule. And this team, because of some of the casualties that they've had, the cap casualties, they do lack depth at certain positions, which could become very problematic. The wide receiver room is shaky to me. Coleman, Samuel, Shakir, you're going to be relying a lot on Kincaid in the run game, I would imagine. You added MVS. You
might not make the team at this point. Yeah, he's on the roster
bubble. Off, I think. So you do still have Josh Allen. It's top 5, top 3, depending on you ask, quarterback in the NFL. Offensive line should be solid, as long as that transition for McGovern at center is smooth. If Coleman can just be a legit number 1, because they have a lot of guys like Shakir and Samuel and even Coleman kind of too. I want to put them all in the slot at times. It's I'm just curious how this is all, and Kincaid too. You want to put in the slot. I'm just curious to see how this all works out from a formation standpoint.
Coleman seems like they're playing him outside, at least.
Yeah, you got to play. I mean, you have to play Coleman outside with
Shakir and Samuel.
And Samuel. Yeah. There's no other choice. But yeah, I want to see who that other outside receiver can be. Shakir has a lot of speed, has showed some promise, but got a lot more on his plate now. So yeah, schedule is just so tough. I'm leaning under. I project just under 10. There's not a ton of value. Now this has come down a bit, but I think that there's a lot of ways that this could go wrong. And I do think that the defense is going to take a step back because of those safety losses, because of the Milano loss. A lot of respect for McDermott, but yeah, I think that the Bills last year too, my other future, the last couple of years, it's been there. It was there. And I think that window might just be open maybe this much, but it's closing rapidly in Buffalo. So we'll see how it all works out, but lean under on the Bills.
Yeah, I agree. I just think this is a very competitive division, especially if, you know, unlike last year, Aaron Rodgers doesn't go down week one or whatever that may be. You know, the Jets are going to factor in a lot more this year. You still have a fairly competitive rest of the AFC. Only a few like truly terrible teams. So, yeah, I think it's going to be tough for Buffalo. I think it's going to be a dogfight. And remember, this is a team that did go, what were they, 5-5 at one point last year? I still have questions about that receiver room and like you said, the safeties. So under on Buffalo for me as well. The Jets at 10.5 plus 125 to the over plus 180 to win the AFC East. This is a team I think the schedule's a little bit more forgiving just because they didn't end up doing as well last season. I think the offensive line should be better for the Jets. Still a question mark with Aaron Rodgers, obviously coming off the Achilles injury at the other side of 40, but at least you have a backup in Tyrod Taylor, who's I think more respectable than any of the guys they had last year, whether it was Simeon or Boyle or obviously Zach Wilson. So what's your outlook for the New York Jets this year?
Yeah, that's a good point with I mean last year half the teams in the league needed to use a backup quarterback. So, you're basically 50-50 that you're going to need to use it. And if you look in the history of the NFL, lowest interception rates, top 5. Aaron Rodgers, number 1. Jacoby Brissett, number 2. He's another, we'll talk about him in the Patriots. Tyrod Taylor, number 3. Herbert, 4. Mahomes, 5. Brady, 6. Mahomes and Brady are tied. With Kaepernick, actually, also. So why has Brissett and Taylor been so good as backups for so long? One of the main reasons is they come in and they don't make mistakes, which you see far too often with backups. They come in, they take care of the ball, they're professionals. So yeah, it definitely raises the floor on the Jets. This win total has come way up. The reason I'm hesitant to bet the Bills under and a lot of teams in this division, I don't know what to do with the Jets. So kind of muddies every team in this division, obviously, because you play them each other twice each. Rodgers, last year the defense was elite, and the defensive front has 7 former first-round picks on that defensive front. You're mainly going to be playing with just 2 linebackers, Williams and Mosley are elite. 4-2-5, cover 3 quarters heavy defense, just in a super aggressive defensive line, which you can be when you have Sauce Gardner on the back end. You have Reed at one corner spot who's super underrated, and Carter in the slot is also, I think, just an outstanding cornerback trio. Safeties, meh. But when you're getting pressure and you have lockdown corners, you don't need to do too much. But Clark and Adams, they're okay. I'm not in love with the group, but the one area that I am a bit worried about, besides safety, is, and if injury luck turns, because they were super healthy on defense last year, not on offense. Defensive end. So you lost Huff. You also lost Franklin Myers, but you bring in Reddick. Everything's okay, right? Well, no. He is requesting a trade. I don't know what's going on with him, but I think that their this defensive scheme relies a lot on their defensive line. So defensive end could take a step back and could impact the pressure that they get and what Saleh wants to do. So that's something that I'm watching. Tack McKinley's flashed of late, but man, it'd be nice if you had a happy Reddick in there who could you'd plug in for Huff, and there'd be no drop off. The offense, they have the pieces. Can they stay healthy? This is why I don't know what to do because the depth isn't there. With the Jets. Rodgers, obviously got hurt in the first play last year. He's 40. It's going to be 40. When's he going to fall off? A couple of years ago, numbers weren't great, but there was some other circumstances. He had a thumb, blah, blah, blah. When's he going to fall off? Is it this year? Is it next? It's one of the next couple of years he's going to fall off hard. I don't know when that is. The offensive line. Tyron Smith, you bring in major injury questions there. You bring in Moses, you bring in Simpson, from the Ravens. Moses, good get. And, you bring in Mike Williams. Talk about injury issues again. Can he stay healthy? He's not getting any younger. But you pair him with Garrett Wilson. It's like on paper, this team, if they all stay healthy, they're a Super Bowl contender if Rodgers, he doesn't need to be an MVP caliber. He just can't fall off a cliff. Be slightly above average and, be like the 10th to 12th best quarterback in the league. And this team's a Super Bowl contender if the defense stays healthy. And I think like just they figure out the defensive end and corners stay healthy importantly because like the safeties, that's when the safeties become exposed. But I do think the D probably takes a slight step back if they don't figure out this defensive end. They can't be much better than they were, but if the offense is better, they won't need to be as good and they won't be on the field as much as they were last year. So, yeah, I mean, the offensive coordinator is still Nathaniel Hackett, which I don't love, but like it's just going to be Rodgers running the show. 6 of their first 11 games are in primetime. They're, tough just schedule-wise, how they start the season. You got 2 games in Florida late, which is good, like at Miami, at Jacksonville. The schedule of opposing passers does ease up overall than what you faced last year. So, yeah, the defense, regardless if they take a slight step back, it's still one of the best defenses in the NFL. Just comes down to, like, in the offensive line, Mike Williams, can they stay healthy? And will Rodgers stay healthy? There's correlation with the offensive line staying healthy. And where is Rodgers on the spectrum of quarterbacks right now? I don't know the answer to that. So it's very hard for me to properly power rate the Jets and be confident enough in my number to bet over under. Where I have it right now, I have them projected for 9.5 wins. So up to starting to get up to 10. I think this was like 8.5, 9 at one point. Would lean under, but I just struggle with the Jets because I don't know where Rodgers really is going to be. Is he like just do I assume he's going to be average if he stays healthy? Can he get back to like MVP a couple of years ago, or is he going to fall off a cliff, which you do see with quarterbacks eventually, all of them by the time is undefeated. So curious to get your thoughts on what you think of Rodgers this year and this Jets team in general.
Yeah, I'm not very bullish on Rodgers. I think the decline has already begun. Regardless of I know he played with an injury a couple of years ago when his numbers fell off the last year in Green Bay. But I do still like the Jets, not necessarily over the win total as much, but I don't mind them if you're betting up some higher upside bets with the Jets because, again, I think this is a high ceiling team, but the floor is also raised because of Taylor. So like there's spots on the schedule where a lot of spots actually where I look and I say, even if Rodgers is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, or they have to start Tyrod Taylor, is his defense good enough to still win the game for him? Yes, absolutely. Because, they're playing the Titans and the Patriots twice. They're playing the Broncos. They're playing the Vikings. They're playing the Steelers, the Cardinals, the Colts, Seahawks. There's a lot of winnable games Vikings there for the Jets, and not a bunch of ones where you're like, oh, there's no way unless Rodgers is healthy that they're going to win this game. So overall, I'm a lot more bullish on the Jets than I've been in years past, especially last year when I think the hype was too high. But I do think that the win total up to 10.5 is starting to get up there. But I do think they have a better path to hitting that win total than a team like the Buffalo Bills. So if it's between Jets and Bills for anyone out there, I would rather roll with the Jets. But there's still some fragility there, obviously, with the injury concerns. But I do like that backup quarterback is key.
Everything I was talking about was variance, right? Yeah. With Rodgers. So what do you want to do with that? Because if he is good and he is healthy and the offense stays healthy, the special teams was great last year too. The defense is a Super Bowl caliber. Then this team could compete for a Super Bowl. So yeah, with that variance and uncertainty with Rodgers, if you want to bet the Jets, I agree. I think you go at this point, now the market has adjusted it, you look higher upside bets.
Miami 9.5 minus 135 to the over is the win total at BetMGM. Plus 210 to win the AFC East. Miami, obviously, that Tyreek Hill Tua Tagovailoa connection always gives this team upside, but ultimately, does this team have a cap ceiling in the sense that when they start going to the playoffs, if they have to go on the road, which very possible in the AFC, just given, the amount of teams they're competing with, that probably caps their ceiling a little bit. And, they did lose Hunt on the interior. So I think that interior line on offense is also a bit of concern. But what do you see for Miami heading into this year?
Yeah. By the way, Jets have sixth easiest schedule. So we mentioned that. That's definitely very beneficial for that team this year. And schedule of opposing quarterbacks, like I mentioned, gets a lot easier. But the Dolphins, they went 11-6 last year. What was the storyline though? Beat up on the bad, get thumped by the good. I think they went 10-0 against non-playoff teams, 1-6 against playoff teams, losing by an average of over 2 touchdowns per game. So, their offense just is so explosive. Talked about from a scheme perspective, what McDaniel does to counteract some of these more modern Fangio type defense. He's just ahead of the curve. And their offense, which I had, I think, second last year, will be a top 3 offense again, assuming everyone stays healthy. It doesn't like Tua, I wouldn't have paid him. But he's basically just there to facilitate all the speed that's around him with A-Chain and Mostert and Waddle and Hill. You had OBJ as well, which doesn't hurt. But yeah, worried a little bit about the interior offensive line. You lose Williams and Hunt. Brewer, I think, is a step back at center. And one of the reasons why the Dolphins struggled against the good teams last year is, like, number one, they tend to have good coaches. So you're not just going to, they can scheme against you. It's a little bit harder to just have wide open guys all over the field. And they tend to have better schemes defensively to generate pressure. And if you can get pressure on Tua, that's all you need to do. So if the interior of that offensive line doesn't work out, and by the way, can Armstead stay healthy at left tackle? When he's healthy, he's still absolutely elite, but he's a lot more fragile now at this point in his career. So, yeah, it's a team, I think, with a pretty high floor because of the offense. Shout out to my guy Mike White, by the way. But with that offense, assuming they stay healthy, even if the offensive line takes a step back, they're still going to put up points. I think where this team could potentially, but they'll need their offense in order to compete in the AFC. They're going to need their offensive line to be a lot better because of Tua and how he handles pressure. But they're still going to win, 8, 9, 10 games regardless. But the offensive line, that's number one to reach their potential. And then the defense. Their defense was bad last year under Fangio. It just didn't go well. So now the question becomes, you lost Howard, who cares? But you lost Van Ginkel, you lost Baker. And the defense, their front seven just basically complete flip. Lost a ton of guys, brought in a ton of guys. Chubb and Phillips, how healthy are they? When are they going to come back? And how effective will they be after devastating injuries? That is huge for this team. Because you lost Van Ginkel. Barrett retired. You brought him in as a reinforcement. And just the upside of this defense with Anthony Weaver coming as a defense coordinator. Some similarities talked about that in the last podcast with what Fangio does. So there's some scheme similarities, won't be completely foreign. He does want to use he said in his presser, which was kind of a shot at Fangio. He said using Ramsey just to sit on the outside or in the slot is like a fool's errand or just a waste of him. So, which makes me think that he wants to use Ramsey as Kyle Hamilton, which then makes me think, okay, that means he's not going to be on the outside. You bring in Kendall Fuller, which I think is actually an upgrade over Howard at this point in his career. I'm not a big Kohu guy. Some people are. I'm not. So that means who's going to be on the outside? I don't think it could be Kohu. Can't be Nick Needham. Ethan Bonner is a name to keep an eye on. who's rising up the depth chart. It's a ton of speed, Stanford kid. He might start on the outside. I'm so curious to see how this defensive backfield shakes out. You obviously bring in Poyer, I think a good veteran presence. Marcus May adds some depth, and then you have Javon Holland, who's one of the best in the business. So if they can figure out, Weaver can figure out how this secondary comes together, how he wants to use Ramsey as like this chess piece. So if that's the case, who's going to be the outside corner then? If he can figure that out, and then you get a healthy Phillips and Chubb, then this defense has potential. The linebackers are solid enough. The interior defensive line is meh, but then this defense has some potential with Weaver at the helm. Brought Ogba back as well after I think they let him go, then brought him back. But so, yeah, Chubb and Phillips' health and how this secondary comes together under Weaver and then this offensive line, I think those are the two keys to unlocking the ceiling of this team, but very high floor because of the offense. I project them 9.5 wins, right at the win total. Schedule does get much tougher this year, and they play at Green Bay, at Cleveland, at the Jets late in the year in potential cold weather. Not ideal for this Miami team, just the way that they're constructed and want to play. Saw that. I know there's a ton of injuries. We saw that partly in Kansas City in the playoffs. So, yeah, I could see the case for the upside, just like if the defense, there's pieces there, and if Chubb and Phillips are healthy and the offensive line comes together. But I'm just not a Tua believer. I don't think Tua can win a Super Bowl. It's good enough to get you to the playoffs, maybe win a game or two. But against the elite defenses that are going to generate pressure and going up against the elite quarterbacks in the AFC, I don't see it enough at their current price to invest. So love McDaniel, but I'm curious to see how this D comes together, but pass for me on the Dolphins.
Yeah, it's tough to really do anything with them for me too, because I am right on their win total. I think the Jets are in a better position to win the division because of the schedule. And then I don't want to bet high upside bets on Miami because unless they get the number 1 seed in home field throughout the playoffs, I think they're going to run into a spot that's just going to be too difficult to overcome in terms of, maybe having to go on the road in the AFC.
Weather too. If they don't get, it's going to be hard to get the 1 seed playing in that division.
Yeah.
Which means you're probably going to like Baltimore, Kansas City, all these cold weather outdoor games. So, pass for me on the Dolphins.
Patriots 4.5 is the win total, -125 to the over. This team, I think this team's going to be bad. The one thing they have is Drake May with the uncertainty there, but unlike a team like the Texans where you had CJ Stroud and that uncertainty, this is a tough division. I mean, you're talking about the top 3 teams in this division could each win double-digit games. So I don't really see it for the Patriots. This is a team where even though they have a very low win total, still tempted to bet the under. I mean, their schedule is just brutal. San Francisco, Cincinnati, obviously the Bills, Jets, and Dolphins twice. Houston, you still play Jacksonville, Chicago, the Rams, teams on that kind of, probably a little better, average or better than average. The offensive line could be the worst in the league. Receiver room probably is the worst in the league. The quarterback room could be the worst in the league. I mean, there's just a lot of downsides for this team, and I don't see too much upside given the division they're in. What do you think about the Pats?
Yeah, I talked about it on our preseason general overview that the Pats were taking under money at like 5.5. And I said I might bet the over if it gets down to like 4.5, 4. I don't think it'll get to 4. But now I'm in line with the market because of what's transpired over the past month. The defense had the potential to be pretty damn good. I do think losing Belichick does hurt. Like, number one, he couldn't draft anymore. He couldn't coach special teams. His in-game management, running the team had deteriorated, but he still could scheme up a defense and make adjustments as well as any coach in the NFL. So you have to account for that. But the defense still had a lot of pieces, and they were going to, get 2 of their top 3 corners back from last year. You have Gonzalez, who really flashed before he got hurt. the two Joneses. You have Duggar and Peppers at safety. That's a really good secondary to build around. And then, a defensive lineman, a stud, one of the most underrated in the NFL, and Barmore. And then you get Judon back. But guess what? Judon got traded. Barmore probably not going to play this year, dealing with blood clots. Two huge losses, just massive losses. So still a decent secondary. And they got some, guys that are positionless with some talent, but just losing those two really hurts and really lowers the ceiling of this defense. And, on the offensive side of the ball, I like Drake May. I think he's going to be a good quarterback in the NFL. But, look at the situation you're putting him in. Like you said, the offensive line. The offensive line, as of now, I think Verdarian Lowe starting at left tackle, City Sill at left guard, Andrews at center, Onwenu at right guard, Okorofor, who they got from the Steelers, at right tackle. That's horrendous because Cole Strange might miss the entire year with a patellar tendon injury, which is he might not ever come back from. Those are brutal. I think that Gerard Mayo, the new Patriots coach, I think that he never was able to recover and be the same player after he had that same injury. But that offensive line, which looks really bad on paper, you would say, okay, it was bad last year with a lot of those same guys, but at least they're getting better in camp. Well, the last few days, they've just been trying. They were like, we got to try a bunch of different combos. Jordan, Wallace, Michael Jordan, Wallace, and not the good Michael Jordan, Robinson, they're all getting first-team reps the past few days. They're moving Onwenu to right tackle. It's a mess. Bourne, recovering from injury, still not practicing. Wide receivers, very underwhelming. Javon Baker has been bad lately in camp.
Yeah, can't stay in bounds on a route.
Yeah, so it's and by the way, this also applies to the Dolphins. Jets special teams good last year. Dolphins special teams last couple of years. You got to clean that up, McDaniel. And the Patriots special teams are a mess. The kicking competition is a mess. Belichick really lost his grip there. I wanted to buy the Patriots because I'm like, the defense could be decent. I like Drake May. Brissett is a good backup. Will keep you in games. The schedule is just vicious. They could be dogs in every game. Their easiest games are like Seattle at home, at Tennessee, Indy at home, and at Arizona. Like the rest of the schedule is, you don't really feel confident being like, they could win that game. So yeah, now with these defensive losses, the offensive line issues, I just can't get there. But the metrics in my gut says they do bounce back, probably get lucky in a couple games, and I like May. Just how much can you do with that offensive line and wide receiver? But last year they were unlucky across the board and everything. They were bad, but fumbles, field goals, injuries, penalties, you name it, they were one of the most unluckiest teams out. They were still a bad team, but a lot of that stuff usually bounces back. So I would imagine Brissett probably starts. Like you got to go Cincy, Seattle, New York, at San Fran, Miami. You have a late bye, but you're home against like Houston, Jacksonville, New York. They're like 1-4, 0-5. Then you could see May. So I think Brissett's a good guy to have there. But just the schedule's so tough. The two star defenders, losing them in the offensive line and wide receiver room. It's just in this division, it's hard to bet the over. And now after adjustments, I'm pretty close to market now.
Yeah, it's either under or nothing for me on the Patriots. I think if you're looking for more upside, bet this team to be the worst team in the league. Maybe even the last team to get a win, but I want to fade this team somehow because I just think disaster waiting to happen. Or probably, disaster last year. I think that disaster continues. But let's go to the AFC South. The Texans are the top team in the division by odds with a win total of 9.5 at BetMGM, minus 145 to the over. Even money to win the division. Now, Houston is a very high upside team because of Stroud. They had Danielle Hunter, they got Diggs. So the issue with Houston, I think, is just the schedule is going to be a lot harder. Last year they kind of took advantage of playing an easier schedule. But with CJ Stroud, I think anything's possible. So Houston's a little tough just because I want to be super bullish on them. And the win total is kind of low hanging fruit at only 9.5, but it's still going to be a gauntlet of a schedule. And there are games that, even with this explosive offense, I can see this team losing. So where are you on the Texans?
Yeah, I mean, like how I usually handicap and look at things, because this is a team that I would want to fade. Right there, the win total last year was what, 6.5, and they went 10-7 with an easy schedule, but I don't want to fade them. I
Yeah,
don't want to fade CJ Stroud. I want to buy into CJ Stroud. Like, market just might not be adjusting enough to how good CJ Stroud is.
yeah, that's very
And they
true.
were the most injured team on offense last year, and also one of the 5 most injured teams on defense. So I know they were plus 10 in turnovers, an easy schedule, but I mean, the offensive line was damaged all year, right from the week 1 when they played Baltimore with a bunch of backups, no continuity, dealt with injuries all year. I want to see can how the offensive line shakes out. Can they stay healthy? If they just stay healthy, they're going to be better than they were last year. But can they find a run game? They bring in Mixon, but they haven't had a run game to complement what Stroud can do. Pretty good pass protection, this group, but they just don't really get that big of a push. I mean, Tunsil is like, he's kind of the leader of that. He's great in pass protection, but not the best run blocking left tackle. So they were mentioning like switching up, like Titus Howard going to guard. I wouldn't do that. Just keep Shaq Mason and Kenyon Green, throws at center. Keep Titus Howard right tackle. You also brought in Blake Fishers, could be a decent like depth piece if needed. But yeah, this team is loaded at wide receiver. Look at what Stroud was doing last year after the injuries. Like, Tank Dell went down. Now you get Tank Dell back. You add Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins. I mean, Noah Brown was balling last year. They are just loaded at wide receiver. The defense, I mean, I just love what this team is doing. They said, we got Stroud, rookie deal. Let's go for it. It's why they brought in Diggs, why they went out. And I mean, yes, you lose Rankins, you lose Grenard, Cashman. Who cares? He had a really good year last year, but their linebackers on paper, you bring in Al-Shir from Tennessee, he's a good player. Linebackers in general aren't great. They usually play with 2 linebackers, but about a 4-2-5, 4-man rush, cover 3/4 team under D'Amico Ryans. Blake Cashman had a resurgent year under D'Amico Ryans. He knows how to coach linebackers. He knows how to get them back in those hook zones of their cover 3. So I'm not worried about the Texans linebackers. Then the defensive line, you have Will Anderson there. I like the additions. Edwards is flashing of late. Fatukasi. Defensive tackle, I still have some questions, but you bring in Daniil Hunter. Danico Autry is suspended. Derek Barnett is still there. Jerry Hughes, who can still do some things in some packages, defense. So they're going to be able to get pressure. And then this comes down to, I think, the secondary, how it really shakes out. Derek Stingley is going to be good. It's going to be a great corner in this league. I'm confident in saying that. So the question is, how does the rest of the secondary pan out? The way that I'm hearing and seeing is, and I actually like this because I love Jalen Petrie. I always have. I love him coming out of college at Baylor. At Baylor, he played like their joker nickel position. He was like a slot safety. I think he's going to be their starting nickel. And that's where we've seen him some snaps there at practice, and in the preseason. Ryans has talked about his versatility there. So I think the best way that this all works out is, but I don't know. Lassiter kind of profiles as more of a slot too. But I think it's going to be to start, maybe Lassiter on the outside, Petrie in the slot, Bullock at strong safety, and then Jimmy Ward at free safety. The good news is that you brought in Okudah and Henderson, former first-round draft picks, who have disappointed in their careers, 1-year deals. Can one of them step up? So there's a lot of pieces to work with. Can they find the right ones? Because their pass D last year was bad. And you could throw on them. Trust Stingley. I like the idea of Petrie in the slot, but what does that do for the rest, for the other safety position, for CB2? That's gonna be the difference between this team, achieving their full ceiling and not. So super curious. That's what I'm watching very closely with the Texans. But this team is loaded. And I want to buy in on them just on the upside. I just want a piece of it. So I don't know if it's going to be a future, not the division, but super upside, Super Bowl, or like Stroud MVP. I think Stroud's also like, is this a narrative award kind of too? And Stroud's like out in the media a ton. So I think that helps his case. Very personal guy. He's like, he does like a podcast and really sharp, and he's always out there. I think that helps him, really likable. So yeah, and the secondary is still my main question. And they play in a division where like the Colts and the Jags, major questions in the secondary. And they do have a harder schedule. What does that mean though? More competitive games, potential for more numbers.
Yeah,
I think they're going to be a winning
yep.
team. So I think Stroud could put up huge numbers this year. I project them just under 10 wins. So yeah, no, I don't see any value in their division futures or win total, but I just want to piece the upside of Stroud before, I just think he's that guy. And we might look back and say 15-1, that was dumb. They should have been 10-1.
Yeah.
By, week 7, especially with the defensive additions, better offensive line luck, the wide receiver additions, good coaches, I think. Would just like for them to find, like last year they had a bad rush O, good rush D, great pass O, bad pass D. Can they just get those bad units up a little bit? But yeah, I like this team.
Yeah, I like them too. And the more I look at it, I don't even mind their win total over in their division, because at the same time, like the true gauntlet is going to come once you get to the playoffs, right? So yes, you want to bet in their upside, but I mean, if they're as good as if we want to bet on their upside, I mean, they're clearly the best team in the division. And it's a little overpriced, but I still would rather do it than not. Cause I mean, 9.5 wins, they could blow past that. And it shouldn't be close in the division if they're as good as we think they are. So I don't have as much of a problem with it, but I agree. I think you want to invest in this Texas team. And I do like that Stroud MVP call for the same reasons. I looked at their schedule and they're going to be in a ton of high scoring games. So like that. The Jaguars are, one of those teams that are kind of middle of the pack here. 8.5 is the win total, -115 to the over at BetMGM, +275 to win the South. I have questions about their cornerbacks, and I have questions about their offensive line, and I have questions about their pass rush. What about you?
Yeah, interesting team. But for what it's worth, the 2 MVP bets that I like this year, both in this division, more of a longer shot would be Trevor Lawrence. Mm-hmm. Could be in a bunch of shootouts. If he has the pedigree, I don't know if he puts it all together.
He was unlucky these last few years. Like especially, I think he had the most drops over the last years. And last year it was just, he played better than his numbers. But so yeah, I see what you're saying. But he might just be like a little above average. He might just not be that generational talent that we thought he was going to be when he was selected.
But that's why it's just like a flyer. 40.
Yeah. At BetMGM, he's 30-1.
And Stroud's down to 10-1. I think there's might be a 15-1 out there. Maybe that's not out there anymore. But like Lamar cashed out on this podcast last year. I don't like, no matter what he does this year, I don't think it's just gonna be hard for him to win it again. I would cross him right off. But Lawrence 40-1. I liked it a little bit more, but he would be my longer shot, and Stroud would be the bigger position. But Jaguars this year. Interestingly enough, they made a defensive coordinator change. Caldwell out, he was the from the Bowles tree, and they bring in Ryan Nielsen. But their defense was actually like decent last year, metrically at least. Above average, adjusted for schedule. They are going to be moving to a 4-3 heavy nickel. It's like the Ryan Nielsen. He comes from Atlanta. He's a Dennis Allen tree guy. So he wants to run cover one, press, and although too high shell. That's like the Dennis Allen Saints. They play a ton of man and press, but they also play too high safeties. Play a lot of quarters too. So I'm curious to see how this defense plays out because he wants to play a ton of man, and the D was awful in man last year, and they were good in zone. You sign Tyson Campbell to a big contract. He was horrendous in man last year, but he was hurt, and he was pretty good at man a couple years ago. Ronald Darby can play man. You bring him in at the second corner spot, but he's 30. We all know what that means for a heavy man corner, and Darby is made of glass. So will this actually work? I don't know. I mean, there's some pieces to like. I think Robertson Harris better suited for a 4-3 also. You have some good pass rushers to work with in a 4-3. I just don't know if this scheme is going to work with this defense. The offensive line should be better, though. That's something that will definitely help Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you bring in Morse at center. That's an upgrade. You have a healthy Cam Robinson. Harrison, right tackle, year 2. Can they finally learn how to run block and get some semblance of a running game to help Lawrence? So, yeah, there's some piece. I really like the linebackers. Olukun's probably the most underrated player in the NFL. Lloyd is a decent linebacker, too. Struggles in coverage a bit, but it's all going to come out of the secondary, which has been a problem for Jacksonville for a couple of years. They were better in zone last year. Darby and Campbell, can they run this man-heavy D? If they can, that there's some pieces up front that Nielsen has to work with. But definitely uncertainty. They only have 6 home games because they're playing in the UK twice against the Bears and New England. Overall, I have the Jags projected for 8.6, 8.7 wins. So, I mean, the slightest of leans to the over. Have a league average schedule. If I had to take a position on the Jags, be some upside with Lawrence, or maybe to make the playoffs if you can get a good plus money record. But it's a tough team to crack, the Jags. So curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, to me, they're an 8.5 win team. Like, they're an average team. I guess there's an outside shot for them to win the division if Stroud goes down early or something like that. But Houston still has pretty good backups, and I don't want to fade Houston, so that's why I'm not really bullish on anything Jacksonville wise. And I agree with you. I think the scheme defensively could take some time, and offensively, yes, Lawrence was unlucky, but still could be just a very average kind of team. So I don't love the upside for this team, and I don't want to really bet on them floor wise because I like the Texans so much in this division. I think the Colts are dangerous too, so yeah, nothing for me on Jacksonville, but Indianapolis is 8.5 with their win total minus 105, plus 325 to win the division. This is a team that, especially early in the offseason, I definitely wanted to fade. I still have a lot of questions about their cornerback group, and Richardson, can he stay healthy? Do like the offensive line, though. I think the receiving core could be shaping up quite well as well if Downs can make it back from injury. So Indianapolis, don't really know what to do with them either. They're kind of in this purgatory, but I just like Houston, so I'm not really doing anything bullishly on the Colts. But where are you?
One of my favorite unders in the AFC, along with the Chargers. I project 7, 8. Not a fan of this team. I mean, why? I don't know. Chris Ballard, smart guy, but I don't know what he's doing. Why didn't they get Snead or Simmons or Diggs? I don't know what he's doing. Is his salary tied to cap space? I don't know. But they had cap space to work with, and they didn't address the secondary. So, and he's had a lot of quotes about it, like, yeah, they were young last year. You guys said the offensive line was bad. But look, Gus, and I'm not a Gus Bradley guy. He's still running. I talked about this last podcast, the cover 3, Carroll, San Fran, 49ers, Seahawks tree. Ryans, he's adjusted. Saleh, he's adjusted. Raheem Morris is adjusted. Dan Quinn is adjusted. You know who hasn't? Is your boy, Gus Bradley. He's still running his 4-2-5, 4-man front, cover 3. Every once in a while, it's just an all-out blitz. That's basically it, but usually really static defense. What made that Seahawks defense really good? That cover 3, they would play bail coverages, but you have to ask a lot from your secondary. You had guys like Earl Thomas on the back end, cleaning everything up. Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, the Legion of Boom. You need to run this scheme. You need excellent defensive backs. They don't have it. I mean, the cornerbacks, Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, or Dallas Flowers off of an injury. Ugh. And then, Franklin and Speed at linebacker, they're okay. They'll do their job, but nothing special. Ebby Khan's out for the year. That hurts. I do love Latu, but he's a rookie. The defensive tackle room is strong with Buckner and Stewart. And I actually like Davis in the fit for this defense. They got him from Miami. But the secondary is just the corners. And, I mean, I get that they have Kenny Moore as an outstanding slot. Great tackler. Does it all for them. But even at safety, like Julian Blackmon had a better year last year, playing more in the box. Still not someone you're just like, wow, he's really good. Nick Cross, likely starting at free safety, but maybe it's Thomas, who was not good. Now they're talking about Harrison playing free safety. That won't work. No. And so now they're saying maybe Blackmon will move back to free safety. No, he's better in the box. So then you're going to have Harrison. This is a mess. So no one's won the free safety job yet. This secondary is bad. And last year, they were 27th in pressure rate. So it's not like they were getting a ton of pressure. I don't like this static defense. They don't have the playmakers in the secondary to run it. And it's already outdated. Teams know how to beat it. And then on offense, if you're a Richardson guy, I don't think the defense has the chops, but yeah, maybe you bet him for MVP. But I don't think he has the accuracy or the ability to process defenses yet. So his injury last year hurt. He didn't get a ton of. He's basically a rookie again. A little more experience than a rookie, but you get my drift. And the weapons, are they really that great? Especially Josh Downs, high ankle sprain, that hurts. So the running game will be good. Shane Steichen, I like. We'll put him in good positions to make plays, and his legs give him a high upside. That's why fantasy players love him. He's going to be running all over, but he has a rocket arm. But they're just teams are going to stack the box against this team, take away the run, take away Pittman, and dare Richardson to beat him with his arm. And I just don't think he can consistently enough. I will say everything that I've heard from Steichen is just fast. And they say Richardson is at his best, and he showed this in the preseason and camp, when he's just not thinking and he's just processing one read, is quick, and then he's getting on the ball, no huddle. That's when he's at his most comfortable. Well, this fast offense and this questionable defense.
Yeah, great fantasy.
Looking for some, and I'm looking for some overs. Indianapolis. Indianapolis, Houston, week 1. I hate betting early divisional game overs, but that one jumps out to me. But I like the under with the Colts. I project 7.8. Not a fan of this defense. Special teams also very questionable. And I don't think Richardson is quite ready yet. So yeah, I'm going under in the Colts.
Yeah, that was like my favorite under early in the offseason. Then I was like, all right, you know what? I feel like I'm always biased against the Colts too hard. So kind of eased up a little bit. But now you kind of tucked me right back into it because you make a lot of good points. The offense is still green, and that's kind of the strength of this team. at this point. But Tennessee, 6.5 is the win total, plus 115 to the over, 9-1 to win the division. Callahan comes over from Indianapolis. I think the offense, they gave Levis some pieces, to throw to. The run game should be decent, or at least the running backs are decent with Spears and Pollard, but the offensive line's still a question, could still be bad. And the defense, I'm curious what you think about the defense. I think it has a chance to be better than last year, but your Diggs and Adams on the back end, Awuzie is, he's getting up there in age a little bit. So, I mean, Snead was a nice addition. You still got Simmons, who I love on the interior, but I don't know. Is this team kind of 6.5? Is that, where are you on that? Because sometimes I feel like this team could be a little underrated. But I worry like the offensive line, the fact that Levis, I don't think, even with good pass catchers, I think he still needs that offensive line because I don't think he's a plus quarterback in this league. And then the defense could go, any which way. So I don't really know what to do at Tennessee. What are you thinking?
Yeah, interesting team. You brought in, they were 7-18 over the last 25 games. Bringing Callahan, definitely an upgrade. I mean, he didn't call plays in Cincy, but definitely an upgrade over what they had last year at offensive coordinator. They're going to be more pass heavy this year, less predictable. I still struggle to properly gauge Levis because I don't trust his accuracy yet. Didn't coming into the league, but he actually showed me some things last year when you look at the situation he was put in, right? Like we were just talking about the situation Drake May will be put in. It will be understandable if he just struggles immensely. But Levis had a disastrous offensive line. Disastrous. The weapons were Hopkins and who else? And bad play calling. And he actually showed some things. So, now he should have a better offensive line. Callahan brings in his dad, one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. You add Cushenberry at center, upgrade. You draft J.C. Latham. Still has some issues with his hands, but their left tackles last year allowed a 16% pressure rate. It is astounding. Can't be any worse. The offense can Petit Frere make a leap at right tackle. Callahan will get them the best out of this group. They won't be worse than last year. They upgraded a couple positions. You add Calvin Ridley. And Tyler Boyd. I mean, Tyler Boyd's washed, but knows the offense. Why is Calvin Ridley not better? I don't understand.
I don't think he could. I don't think he's been used as great as he should be, like in the right ways at some spots, like especially Jacksonville.
You can't use him in the slot here, right?
Can't,
because you got to use.
I mean,
Boyd
you
in
might.
The slot.
I mean, I think Traylon Burks actually under Callahan could take a step forward. I'm not saying he'll be amazing, but he is.
You put him on the outside.
Yeah, and or kind of flip flop it because I think the issue with Ridley was he was playing too much X last year. I think he can't. He's not going to beat press coverage. He's not fast enough to just outrun guys either. So
you got to use him over the middle of the field.
Yeah, more you can use him at Z, I think, and in the slot, I would say the better for Ridley. So I think he'll be probably more intelligently used than last year, but he's still, he took there was things mentally I think that we don't necessarily know about, and he's getting up there in age now. He's not as young as he once was, and his best years have come indoors with the Falcons. So probably just a little overrated to start his career. That's all, but still an upgrade over what they had last year, all things considered.
Yeah, I think so. I think the offense will be better for Levis, Mr. Mayonnaise Cologne. I don't know if anyone's
right. Oh yeah, I heard about that.
So the offensive line should be better. The weapons are better. I don't mind. Like you lose Derrick Henry, but Pollard and Spears. I've been a Spears guy since Tulane. You're okay there. You can throw to them too. So I think the offense will be better than people think. The defense, you lose Al-Shahir, you lose Autry, but which does hurt. But you added Snead and Awuzie, so. Their defensive backfield last year was a disaster. Could not stop a nosebleed in the pass game. So you add Snead and Awuzie. Can they stay healthy? That, and are they, because Awuzie wasn't the same player last year coming off an injury. Snead has this knee thing, never seems to impact him, but that's why some teams weren't interested in him, apparently. that like keeps them out of practices and camp last year. But if they can stay healthy and Awuzie regains his form, then all of a sudden this defense has a much higher floor and ceiling and there's just no depth at corner. So like they need them to hit because Denard Wilson comes in from the Ravens, another Ravens tree coordinator. You're going to have them in the Chargers, Titans, Dolphins, and Ravens, obviously now, and Seahawks. But Denard Wilson is not, I don't consider him pure Ravens tree because he also worked under Greg Williams, Todd Bowles, Jonathan Gannon, and McDonald in Baltimore. And I think based on everything that I heard, he's going to be more of a Bowles Williams D, very aggressive, way more blitzing. So I don't think this is going to be just like a Ravens translated defense, much more aggressive. So Snead and Awuzie, having them man up on the outside and having them healthy, I think is paramount and could raise the production of this defense. Linebacker, very suspect with Murray and Gibbons. Cedric Gray you drafted, maybe he can flash there. You still have Simmons on the defensive line. Landry and Key on the outside are pieces to work with. Key had his suspension revoked, which was good. You added Sebastian Day and you drafted Sweat, who I think really fits what Weaver wants to do. What Wilson wants to do on defense. So, yeah, I like some of the pieces here. And then at safety, like you just have a ton of pieces. Like, I don't know how they're all going to come together. Like, you have McCreary, who's pretty good in the slot, but you bring in Jamal Adams, who's kind of like a blitzing linebacker. Maybe you use him there. Hooker is best as a box safety. Do you put Diggs deep? I'm not really sure how it all works out, but there's definitely a lot of pieces there to at least work with. You have Molden, who can't really cover, but he's still there as well. So you brought in a lot of vets, and so you'll get to see. I think it's smart because you'll get to see if Levis is the guy, right? You have a better offensive line. You brought in some vets to throw. You brought in some reinforcements on the defense. And the offensive line's been a disaster. I think it'll be better. It's been bottom 3 the last 2 years in pass protection, bottom 3 yards before contact the last 2 years as well. They can run block, couldn't pass block. Can't be any worse. So while they brought in a lot of vets, and while I do think their season will come down to is Levis the guy, I think the kind of the underlying X factor, the wild card, is can the rookies hit? So if the rookies hit, Latham at left tackle, Gray at linebacker, could really use someone to emerge there, and then Sweat at nose, which is just, I think, a really important piece to what Wilson, I think, wants to do based on the Bowles-Williams defensive scheme. Is a tough schedule, but yeah, I have them top 5 schedule, which sucks because they went 6-11 last year. There's not many, 5 of the last 7 games are against division. There's not many games where you're like, I really like them here. They do play New England at home, the Vikings at home. Other than that, it's pretty brutal. If this comes down to 6, I think I'm going to go over. I project 6.9. I think this roster is better than the market thinks. I know a lot of it's going to come down to Levis, but I like the hires. And yeah, I think this team is a little better than people think. Quick, one question for you before we go to the NFC.
What's up?
AFC playoffs. We're saying, let's just hypothetical. Chiefs, only team from that division?
Yes.
Okay. AFC North, I only say 2 this year.
Bengals, Ravens.
Yeah. Okay. AFC South, let's put the Texans in. AFC East, do you want to put the Bills and Jets in?
Definitely the Jets.
Okay.
Bills, Dolphins are battling for me. I think the Jets just because the
Jets
schedule.
in.
Yeah.
So for 7 spots, we have Chiefs, Texans, Jets, Ravens, Bengals. 2 more. You have the Bills, Dolphins. The obvious choices both are chalk to get to the playoffs. Browns, Steelers. But if any of them fall off, could it be a second team from the AFC South? A lot of people aren't thinking that.
It could.
So I don't know. Titans to make the division. I mean, to make the playoffs. Maybe. I think there is some upside with this team, but
yeah, I think they're more underrated than the Jags and the Colts. Like the market is underrating them as that, in the South outside of the Texans.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And favorite, just to recap, favorite win total, Colts under, and buy the upside on Stroud.
Yeah, for me, it's Patriots under, like the Texans division and over. And yeah, that's going to do it for the AFC East, AFC South. Be sure to check out part 1 of the AFC. If you missed it, that's out now. We'll be back on Wednesday covering the NFC. You can find Stuck on X at Stuckey2. I'm at Chris Raybon. We're at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this money.